meeting to order. We do have a quorum in accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel, and this meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted remotely. The town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19, is currently following the guidance from the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread, and all town facilities are currently closed to the public. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, all public meetings are being conducted remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town website on the COVID-19 Information Center page, accessed through the town manager's webpage, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For the purpose of public comment, if you are unable to join via the computer through Zoom and would like to send a public comment, please feel free to send an email during the meeting to tburchield@lunenburgonline.com, and I will read whatever statements come in at the time of public comment at the end of the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We will be going over the agenda, and I will unmute and call on people as we move through the agenda. I will say at this time, I have unmuted all members of the Finance Committee. If anybody else wishes to be recognized at any time during the meeting, please use the Zoom chat participant list to raise your hand. And then if there are any votes taken during the course of this meeting, they will be taken by roll call. And that takes us to number one of our agenda, which was announcements. And I think that's the only one I have, is just how we're running the meeting. So if anybody else has any announcements they want to make, like Dave, is public health going to close this down for another week or two, or are we good?
I haven't gotten anything on updates in the last 24 to 36 hours. There's been a lot of information going back and forth about recommendations for elections and town meetings, but I haven't really heard much as to what's going to happen next week. Okay.
Then at this time, I'll open it up to any, is there anybody on the committee that has a public comment that they would want to make at this time?
I do.
Peter, where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay. Peter.
Good evening. Yesterday morning, I woke up to a message from a former colleague of mine who is involved in local politics in the town of Belmont, who informed me that on Tuesday night, their school committee was informed by their state representative and state senator that they should be planning on approximately a 25% reduction in local aid to their school department. And it was, admittedly a surprise, and he thought that I should be aware. Upon receiving that and pondering on it for a few minutes, I sent an email to Representatives Hay and Senator Tran, copying the superintendent of schools and the town manager, asking for follow-up to the letter that we had been copied on following the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen a couple of weeks ago that Senator Hay had sent to the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and relaying the information that I had received about what had happened at the Belmont School Committee on Tuesday night. I got very prompt responses from both Senator Tran personally and from Senator Hayes' office. Senator Tran's response was I didn't know where and I'm paraphrasing. I don't know where the information came from, but it's not unrealistic. And his advice was that we should be continuing to plan conservatively, assuming a 20 to 25% cut in local aid. Later in the day, I had a conversation and then an email exchange with Representative Hay, and then he called and left me a voicemail last night indicating that he had spoken with both the Speaker of the House and the Chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, both of whom refused to offer any guidance in terms of the numbers, but emphasized that they just don't know. And we're recommending that cities and towns operate as conservatively as possible and ideally on a month-to-month basis, which I interpreted to mean that the state leadership is assuming that cities and towns are going to be operating on a month-to-month basis and not passing annual budgets. So I understand that this situation is extremely fluid and things are changing all the time. There's a bill before Congress right now that is supposedly going to bring aid to states and municipalities. I don't know if that's even, what the feasibility is. But my inclination is that we need to be, probably even more conservative than we've been over the last month and a half. My understanding is, the ship has essentially sailed on town meeting with respect to what the Board of Selectmen can do. It's more or less up to the town moderator at this point. But, in my mind, we should be thinking about all free cash going to stabilization. And we should be thinking about, spending policies that are, incredibly draconian, at least through the summer, until we have a better idea. And I recognize the fact that that is completely unrealistic for the school department to live by. But right now, on May 14th, our state leadership, in my personal opinion, the governor, the leadership in the legislature, is completely out to lunch, and our priorities are at the bottom of their list. And until that changes, we cannot land on an annual budget, despite the recommendations that we made, knowing what we knew a week ago and what the Board of Selectmen made just Tuesday night. Thank you.
Okay. Heather, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I read that response from Representative Hay entirely different as far as tone. And I also talked to Representative Hay yesterday as well when I got that response from Senator Tran, because there has been zero guidance from any leadership in the state about numbers. And when I talked to Representative Hay, his response was, it's just as dangerous to throw out numbers like that as it is to have no guidance. So to throw out a 25% reduction when no one in the leadership has said that is a dangerous pattern. So I think there's food for thought there. And when I talked to Representative Hay, a majority of the legislators are reaching out to leadership about that state aid and education funding is their priority. So I believe that they're going to come through as best they can for state aid and education funding. In addition to that, I think they'll also look at the rainy day fund as far as subsidizing funding, and the CARES Act funding for that's forthcoming, the legislation that's being discussed in Washington now. So I think this budget is conservative, and I will continue to say that. And I urge you to reconsider putting all that free cash into or making that recommendation.
Okay, since we're just moving through the public comment phase of this, I see you, Peter, and I also see that Dave had his hand up. So I'll go briefly to you, Peter, and then to Dave. So go ahead.
With all due respect to the town manager, the rainy day fund is going to be depleted before we can blink our eyes. The state's unemployment fund was halved last month. It'll be halved again this month. State revenues are down for the month of April over $2 billion. I mean, that is not an option that is going to sustain us into the next fiscal year. And I think it's more dangerous to spend money that we don't know we have, with all due respect. And, you know, where we're at right now, I just think is the minimum amount of cutting and damage that has occurred to our budget thus far. I hope I'm wrong. There's no evidence that the inmates have taken over the asylum on Beacon Hill yet. And there's no evidence, and I watched the press conference again today, that the governor or the leadership has taken notice. So when they do, I'll change my tune. But right now, I think we have to assume the worst.
And I guess one of the things that I was struck by is what I'm not sure in terms of reading that is whether the reference to the 1/12 budget has more to do with whether or not the state is starting to lose faith in the notion that we will actually have town meetings in order to approve budgets, which is what basically, which would be also an interesting turn. But anyway, Dave, you had a public comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, and it seems curious that on one hand, we come up with that information from a couple of sources from state government. Yet on the other hand, they're looking for projects for earmarks, which they're going to have a hearing on. I believe, Heather, it was next week. Is that? And there's a 24-hour deadline to get them in. It really baffles my mind that we don't get a little bit more notice on that. And I know it was reviewed by the Board of Selectmen a number of months ago. So I can only assume that the intent originally was to put in the list that was discussed back then. But things have changed an awful lot, and we only get told 24 hours ahead to, take a look at this because we are bringing it up. That's my comment for right now. I'm sure I'll have more later.
Okay. All right. With that, then we will move to Town Manager and Finance Director reports, if there are any. Do I have to unmute you, or do you just not have any reports that you guys want to bring up?
No, I can add on to confirm that the list that was originally sent in February, that was the list that was sent to Representative Hay.
Okay, and then basically, do you want to review what's on that list?
Yep, I can go over those projects. So
everybody knows what we're talking about.
And these were prioritized in order back in February. $355,000 for hazardous materials abatement and demolition of the old primary school building and feasibility design for future use of the space. $127,000 for a fire alarm upgrade at the Lunenburg Primary School. $180,000 for firefighting turnout gear that would provide each firefighter 2 sets of gear so that after each fire, gear would be cleaned of hazardous materials. And $40,000 for the installation of new LED lighting fixtures at the library. When I did talk to Representative Hay about this, because sometimes, based on my experience, they're looking for projects of a certain cost range, especially if they have a limited amount of funding. And he said he knew of 2 projects that Fitchburg submitted, and he thought maybe the range would be 50 to 100, maybe over 100, but not, large projects. So what I did for the primary school, I also provided a breakdown of those costs. So for the hazardous materials portion, the demolition portion, and an estimate for a design. So if we could get even partial funding for any of those, be more than we have now.
I'm sorry, Peter, did you have something that you had wanted to say?
My only comment that I wanted to make about the earmark stuff was, I just want people to be aware that the bill that they are considering, at least in my understanding, relative to capital, is a bond issuance. So this is all dependent upon issuance of a bond. Why they're doing that now, in light of everything else that's going on, I don't know. But this would not be spending from the regular budget.
Okay. No other reports? We've got nothing good to say. Okay, fine. Then we'll move on to minutes, of which we're passing over until the next meeting. And at this point, we were going to take a look at we were going to review the capital plan review, given that there was some discussion about whether or not there were things that we might make a recommendation, probably at the time of town meeting, to support or not support, given other things that are on there. Now, this is going to be taken completely aside from the discussion about if by the time we get to town meeting, it makes more sense to say, yeah, forget it all, which hopefully we won't be there. But at this point, it's members of the Capital Planning Committee were invited to speak to, and also people who might be able to answer questions about what would happen if we did defer some of those things that are left on the plan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with the capital plan. And I don't know, Dave, I think I'll turn over to you. I know that you had particular questions about whether or not you thought that they were could be priorities or not, in terms of things that it would be good for us to have more information about. So as we're called upon to make any kind of a recommendation, we have a little bit better information and discussion around those things. At this time, I would ask anybody who, I'm going to assume everybody can unmute themselves. So if you do want to speak again, just raise your hand and I'll recognize you. And thank you, Heather. Yes, Capital Planning Committee do you have a quorum tonight?
They have
Yes,
3 on
Lisa.
the screens.
Yep.
Okay. Then you'll probably want to call your meeting to order.
Yep. Heather, do I need to read the whole COVID spiel, or can I just call us to order?
I think you can just call to order and just do a roll call, though, of the members present.
Okay. It's time I call the Capital Planning Committee meeting to order at 7:19. I'll do a roll call. John Henshaw. Here. And Jim Levesque.
Here.
And Damon McQuaid is here.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Then I think, and again, I'll go back. Dave, you had your hand raised, so. you wanted to make whatever point it was that you wanted to make while I try to figure out where the participant list went.
It was in regards to the capital plan. I just wanted to give a little bit of backstory about my comments in previous meetings about the reasons I felt items 1, 3, 6, and 10 should either be postponed for a full year or postponed until town meeting. First of all, the one that I suggested be postponed for a full year, at that time, I was absolutely desperate to find a funding source for the streetlight project. I couldn't see why we weren't pushing to fund that where it had a value-added savings to it right up front and future savings to it also. There isn't a single project on the warrant that gives us the kind of savings that we potentially get from the streetlight project. Secondly, I think after I got the email about the earmarks, if the grant funding goes away for the next step, which would be the conversion, then I see no reason in the world not to try for an earmark. And again, we there may be absolutely no money for anything 6 months from now. But we've already identified that the first phase, and that being purchasing the lights, will save us in the vicinity of $25,000. I hope to get that. I'm assuming that's the correct number. I think 30,000 came from something else. But the payback is 3 years, 4 years at the most, given that scenario. And we need that first phase to even be able to apply for Green Communities grants to go into the next phase and or some other source of funds. So as I said, I was absolutely desperate to find a funding source that did not affect the rest of the budget, and was looking in 2021 with things that were funded by free cash. Now that we have identified a possible source, again, free cash, but not affecting 2021 at all, I'm more comfortable with staying with what's on the capital plan at this point, although I do feel that we could very easily still defer 1, 3, 6, and 10 to the fall and keep that money in stabilization so that we're more fluid than we will be if we put it into the capital plan at the next town meeting, whenever that happens. So those are my thoughts. I know the fire chief is on here, so I'm assuming we'll get an answer on why we should go ahead with the ALS equipment, or if that's not going to affect that process. Of all the projects on there, I really feel that the middle school asbestos abatements program, and again, John Wanda's on here and probably give his perspective as to why we shouldn't push that off. But I think that is the biggest candidate, biggest dollar-wise, and the easiest candidate to postpone. But I'd like to hear some more comments from other people. Thank you.
Okay, then basically what I'd probably like to proceed at this point then. The question that was raised during our meeting was, what would be the cost of, or what would be the problem with pushing some of these decisions out to a November meeting? Which I don't know, I mean, would we be able to do that since if we're using free cash and put it all in stabilization until November's meeting and then brought this back? What would be the detriment? And we'll start in particular with, since it shows up there, the asbestos abatement. Would it be something that would be a significant hardship if we had to defer that to November during any discussions that might come up? So I don't know who might want to speak to that.
And one other real quick point before we get into that discussion. Any changes to this at this point are going to have to be made on town meeting floor. because it's already
No,
gone
no,
public.
right. Yeah, no, my point is that I would like the finance committee, when we're called on to make our recommendation at that time, to have had an opportunity to hear from more directly, like what the potential impact would be of deferring if there is one.
I agree.
So that if we were to be called on to make that choice. And John, I saw you had your hand up.
I did. I can speak on the specific question regarding the hardship or the consequences of the asbestos abatement. One of the things that the committee discussed is that the asbestos abatement should best take place during a school, when school is not in session. We thought about the summer. So if we pushed it off through past the summer, we would have to find another hole in the school year. And I just don't know how time consuming the job is.
Okay. John, Londa, I thought that I had seen your hand up as well.
Yes, John Londa, Director of Facilities, Lunenburg Public Schools. The asbestos abatement project is approximately a 6-week-long project. So the only real option we have to execute it would be during the month of July and August. So if it doesn't get funded, it will push it into next year. To give you where we are currently with this, so this project, we used Haynes, Leineck and Smith, an architectural firm out of Ashby, to develop the project specifications. The project currently is out for bid. We will be having bids come in on May 28th, so we will know who the low bidder is prior to the town meeting. But if this it gets funded, we would then very quickly have to award the contract, put contracts in place, because there's also a 10-day notification requirement for the contractor with the state. So there are delays that are built in for asbestos projects, make sure that everybody's in the know what's going on. Right now, we think if this gets funded, that we will be able to execute this fall. I mean, by the end of August, it'll be done. But if we delay the town meeting or special town meeting in November per se, that will really mean that project will happen next July.
Okay, and then I guess the follow-up question to that would be, what hardship does that create?
So we're doing asbestos abatement. This is the most sensitive type asbestos, and it's considered friable or very loose. It is above the ceiling, but we've been told to get the stuff out of there because it represents a hazard. Is it an imminent hazard? No, but the containment is a 50-year-old 12 by 12 inch ceiling tiles, which are very brittle and not that good of a seal, to be honest. But so it's just that it's something we think should be moving forward, just to allow us to have the peace of mind that we've gotten all this friable asbestos out of the school.
Dave?
Yeah,
You have your hand up, Dave?
Yes, just further comment that from the description of the need to get it out and the urgency to get it out, that was my thought process in one of the projects that could easily be put off for a full year. And in my comments originally in regards to this matter, I had said that if it doesn't get done in the summer, meaning if it's pushed off to November, I was already aware that it would not happen till the next year, which was another reason why I felt it was one that if we need to get more money in stabilization, or if we feel we need to put more money in stabilization and be ready for the fall to fund other issues, that was a big chunk of money that I felt that could help that process. Also, and John, just alluded to it. It is a third phase of a three-phase project, but again, it does not clean the building. It works on an area of highest priority for remediation, but it does not clean the building completely.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions at all around the asbestos item or comment?
I do, Terry. I can't figure out how to raise my hand right now, though. So apologies.
Okay.
Um,
Go ahead.
This is a question really for the town manager. In the event that town meeting were postponed, under the rules of the 1/12 budget scenario, could any of this free cash be put anywhere? Can we appropriate this free cash under the 1/12 scenario?
Yes. So Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020 does allow us to use, extend the deadline for free cash beyond June 30th.
So it extends the deadline, but can it be appropriated by the Board of Selectmen or wherever is taking responsibility for those 1/12 increments?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I didn't know.
Okay. It's good to know, actually. Thank you for the question. Dave Passios.
Yep, the other comment that I left out in my previous comments was that looking through the summer, there is going to be a huge list of challenges that the school district is going to have to undertake just to be able to open the schools back up for the kids in the fall, if they can at all. And to put an asbestos project in a building for 6 weeks while you're trying to figure out how you're going to control access, monitor temperatures, and all the stuff that's going to have to be done. I think that's going to tie up all the resources available. And yes, this is an outside contractor, but you're going to have two entities trying to work on in the same space at Turkey Hill, and I don't think that's conducive to getting things in place to be ready to open school if you're allowed to in the fall. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right, fire. The ALS equipment phase 1. All right, so that question came up onto whether or not we would defer. And one of the items that was raised with that was, since we are already deferring the addition of a firefighter in order to address the paramedic status, does the pushing off the ALS equipment purchase create a hardship on its own? And,
It could, sorry, do you want me to chime in, or did you have something to say?
oh,
Dan?
yes, I'm sorry. I should have just asked you, Chief. Yes.
It could potentially, regardless of the additional position, at the beginning of, at least in the first quarter of calendar 2021, we will have at least 2 paramedics, possibly more, ready to go. My fear would be is if we postpone that equipment to the fall and things continue the way they're going or something, and we don't get that equipment, now we're looking at sometime after July at the earliest in 2021 to get that equipment. And without it, we're dead in the water as far as going to the paramedic level. We'd have people that are trained, they're ready to go, but we don't have the equipment to do that. And that's regardless of whether we get that extra guy, we need that guy. But even if I don't, we still have 2, we'll have at least 2 people that we can at least start doing it in a part-time, at least some of the time, we'll have that level of service there. Somebody had asked, they were concerned, when we talked back in the fall about retention with people. The people I have now, I'm pretty confident they're going to stick around. But the one thing that could drive them somewhere else is they've just spent almost 2 years training and then not be able to use that. And that would be a fear for that there. So to me, I would be afraid of putting that off because of the fear that it might not be there. And I think we
Okay.
need to continue to have that in place.
All right, so basically, if the equipment is in place, you would be in a position to be able to certify as a paramedic level service and be able to bill as a paramedic level service.
We could begin the process of running at the paramedic level. We would not have 24/7 coverage yet, but yes, we would be able to get to that level. We would be able to begin to bill at that level when we have a paramedic on duty.
Peter, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. One question that came up last week, Chief, was in the event that something gets derailed, you've got an attrition problem, whatever, that you're not able to achieve paramedic level certification inside of the next 12 months, 18 months. Does that equipment go to waste? If you've got even one certified paramedic on staff, is that equipment usable?
Yes. Yes, I wouldn't see it go to waste if we were delayed getting the license. The equipment's still there. It's good. The only challenge you would have is you're starting to go through, you're chewing into a warranty period. But if we have at least a couple people, we can start working.
There's nothing preventing us from using it without the certification.
Not quite following what you're saying. If we don't have the certification, we can't use much of that equipment. We don't have the license to operate that equipment at that point.
Okay, that's what I was getting at then.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was getting at.
We need the people and we need the equipment to
Well,
get the license.
But I think there are three issues, Chief. You need the people, you need individuals, you need a department level certification, and you need equipment.
Correct.
And if you don't have part 1 and 2, you can't use 3.
Correct.
Okay.
And right now, like I say, I'm moving on the pace that we're moving. I'm not worried about attrition so much right now. The people I've got, like I say, they've spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears working towards their certifications. They want to be able, once they get certified, to be able to use that. I don't see them going anywhere unless all of a sudden the chance that we're going to ever use it starts to disappear.
Okay, Peter?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Jim Levesque?
This is Jim Levesque. I'm a member of the Capital Planning Committee. Chief, there's also a phase 2 for the next fiscal year regarding this. Can you share with us about how the plan is to use the phase 1 and phase 2 and roll that out as an overall plan, and what would happen if this were to be deferred to next year?
Well, phase 1 is to fit out 1 ambulance. We have 2 currently. So 1 ambulance initially would be equipped with the paramedic gear. The phase 2 and would fit out the 2nd ambulance to have that gear. So if we get a second call and we eventually, along with that, we have enough paramedics coming back, we can staff that 2nd ambulance at the paramedic level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was clear on what the overall plan was relative to this equipment in the.
Right. Instead of buying it all at once, we decided to try to space it out, fit out 1 ambulance 1 year, and then the 2nd ambulance the 2nd year.
Thank you.
Okay. I've made Dave Passios wait long enough. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. Chief, can you give me an idea, and I know it varies on time of year and availability of equipment from the suppliers, but from the time of funding availability to the equipment being in your station, do you have a window that you can tell us what that time frame looks like?
I would
Or
suspect,
thoughts?
I mean, as of, and again, as you know, medical stuff is a little up in the air right now, but at least it's not N95 masks. I would guess within 1 to 3 months, we could have it in place and ready to go.
Okay, that feeds right into my next comment, and that is that I think the comments previous to this were not to push this off into 2021. or I'm sorry, 2022, because we are talking about 21. I think it was to defer from the spring town meeting to the fall town meeting, which keeps it in 21. And from your time frame that you just gave me, if it's funded in early November of 21, then you easily have the potential of having that equipment available to you right after the first of the year. Is that an accurate statement?
If it was funded at the fall town meeting. My fear would be that things continue to go badly and it gets put off. And now you're looking into July, August of the next year at the soonest. You could look at it, presuming it was moved forward. And then do we move out the second ambulance's equipment another year? You know, that's my concern. You know, that we have it here now. I kind of want to keep that in there possibly. I understand what you're saying about putting it off, but I'm just afraid like you said, nobody knows. Nobody knows
Right.
whether things are going to be better in the fall or worse.
Conversely, it gets left in there at Springtown meeting and then yanked at November town meeting. But that process, we've discussed that at length in the past. And that being said, potentially on July 1st, that money would be spent already before we get to fall town meeting. And then we get to fall town meeting and we're $2 million in the hole, and we've just spent $54,000 on equipment that we could have put off. That's just the thought process. I'm not totally against it one way or the other. It's really dollars and cents that we're talking about here.
Okay. Damon McQuaid?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight something that the chief has mentioned in the past. I'm not sure if it's the same with this equipment as some of his fire equipment, but his equipment has a unique factor to it that not everything does. The escalation year to year, the cost of things seem to go up much higher than anything else. So if we defer this, is the cost going to go up, Chief?
It's possible. I don't know. With things in such flux right now, I couldn't honestly say one way or the other on that. I'd hope it would stay the same, but I can't guarantee that. Like
Okay.
everything else, the stuff comes from overseas half the time.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Levesque?
Yeah,
I'm
I
sorry,
would just like,
Damon, have you finished? I can't see anybody, so I don't know if Damon was finished. I'm assuming he was finished, and I
Yep, I'm all done.
realized I cut
Thanks.
him. Okay, thank you. Mr. Levesque?
I would just like to make a point that I think it goes beyond dollars and cents. I think we're also talking about potential human life here. And this is, in my year on this committee, one of the things that we did put a lot of deference and focus on is the health and safety of our community. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up in this conversation. I think this is something that I would be hard pressed to find a way to push this off.
Okay. Mr. Passio?
Yeah, just a final question to the chief. Is there anything in this package that has an expiration date on it? In other words, if this gets pushed off and you're not able to get certified, is there anything in this purchase that's going to expire sitting in its boxes unpacked or on the shelf or whatever?
No, that's all pretty much hardware. There's a small amount of medication involved with that to go to it, but it's not a lot. The big chunk of that is the medication storage and the monitor defibrillator.
Right, and can you defer purchase of the medications or I would assume you'd have to defer until you're certified, wouldn't you?
Yeah, the medication will be the thing that we would buy at the last second. That shouldn't
Right.
be that hard to get. The hardware is the big thing.
Right, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, does anybody have any other questions about any of the other items on the capital plan or any comments to make about any of the items on the capital plan?
I do,
I know
actually.
those came up specifically just because of the size.
Terry,
John, yes.
thank you. Chief, I was going to ask about the self-contained breathing apparatus. That's a replacement. Is it easily postponable? or is the unit it's replacing at end of life?
The units that it's replacing are at end of life. B, we've also already replaced half with the earmark that we were able to get from the legislature last year. So now we're currently operating 2 different models. So there's a training issue, keeping guys up to speed on that. And yeah, the units are coming towards the end of their life.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I guess I'll just leave it at this point to, if any, again, I can't really see people, so if you have a question on any of the items or a comment to make to explain what any potential problem would be with deferring, so that we know we can make an informed decision when we make our recommendation. Mr. McQuaid.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm glad that we're talking about deferring versus cutting. We've already cut the plan quite a bit, and I just need to mention that these are all projects that never go away. They're going to stick around with the pay for them eventually. Our projections, when you look at them for the next 5 years, they don't go down for the yearly capital requests. We had $1.3 million worth of initial requests this year. We're looking at 2.1 next year before everything we just pushed off. 1.7 the year after that, and 1.1 the year after that. So we can push it off to fall town meeting, I guess, if that makes everyone feel more comfortable. But delaying them to next year and next year doesn't help, because they're still going to be there. We'll have things that aren't taken care of.
Right, yeah, I think our concern probably goes more to the points made earlier, that if it looks like we could be in even more dire straits than we anticipate, then pushing a decision off to when we have really better financial information is really what we're looking at, and why we're talking about deferring it all.
Yeah.
So, just so you understand where we're coming from. Mr. Pathio.
Yeah, that was one of the points I was going to make. Also, I'd like to go down the list real quick with the ones I had not marked for deferments or postponement. Highway Department, number 2, Flat Hill Road Culvert. Everybody understands that one. It was well documented that that's a disaster waiting to happen. So we need to move forward with that. That's one that's imminent, not it may happen. That is imminent. Number 4 is kind of on the fence, but the replacement of police vehicles is hugely important because of the amount of use they get. You put it off a year and you're going to have potentially an officer riding around in an unsafe vehicle. The SCBA complement replacement. I agree with the chief's comments. I was a firefighter for 32 years on this department, and working with obsolete equipment and or 2 different models of equipment can be really problematic, especially on the fire ground, because you're trained to do things automatically and you don't have time to think about, oh, which one is this and how do you turn it on, so on and so forth. So I think that's a hugely important investment. The ACO vehicle, small amount of money. I see that as easily pushed off. Midlife overhaul of Squad 3, again, well documented that if we don't do this, we're going to have either an engine out of service or need to replace it much sooner because it's beyond being repaired feasibly. Portable radio is another one that's, I think, is a little flexible, but we haven't had any input from the police chief on that. And finally, the senior center, that reconfiguration is going to stop ongoing damage to the building, which speaks to protecting the infrastructure of the town. Just a quick review of the ones that I felt needed to stay in there. Thank you.
John Henshaw.
Nope, I pretty much, my question
You're
was
all
answered.
set?
Thanks.
Okay, Heather.
I just wanted to add about the ACO vehicle, why that project is important. is because the vehicle used right now does not comply with our green community standards. So it potentially, we could lose our green community status, which in light of the streetlights project, if there is funding next year, that would be extremely detrimental to applying for any further funding.
That would be an additional possible blow towards that process. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Is that imminent?
I'm sorry. It was noted by, and John Londa actually speak probably more to this because he's dealt with a lot of the data and reporting to DOER for the green communities, but it was denoted in their response.
Okay. Did anybody else have any other questions now that I've stopped sharing my screen? Then with that, I think that finishes for now. Any of the questions or discussion that we wanted to have around, again, I think we were pretty clear on why we were raising those questions so that when it comes time to town meeting, if we have town meeting, which hopefully we will, that if there is, depending on how the financial outlook looks, we may be looking to defer more. And again, yeah, we're not looking at this point to cut, but to defer, to put as much in stabilization as possible, if indeed that's where we are when we get through the month of May.
Can I ask a process question? Just while
Yeah,
we're all
absolutely.
here, I think it might be
Sure.
worth taking 5 minutes to kind of work through the process here. So
Sure.
today's the 14th of May. Town meeting is scheduled for the 20th of June, I believe. What's the date?
13th.
13th.
13th. Okay, I'm sorry. Glad we clarified. I'd have been looking around on the 20th. Where is everybody? It's the 13th of June, so roughly 4 weeks away. In the event the town meeting goes forward, is your expectation, Terry, that the finance committee will bring this up again in our meeting in 2 weeks, looking for a recommendation on this prior to town meeting? Or is this something that you think we're going to go right up to town meeting and,
Well, if someone wants to bring it up to discuss further in 2 weeks, we can do that. But my intention would be, since the warrant is out there and we've already deferred any discussion or any decision in terms of a recommendation until that time, then we would caucus at
Okay.
town meeting.
either day
And,
or something? Okay.
Sure. And then basically see where we're standing in terms of whether, just to get a feel for where everybody is, because when we do make our recommendation, it will probably be after a lot of discussion. So,
Okay.
but again, if you would like to, I would be happy to put it on the agenda for 2 more weeks.
No, I
but
just,
we haven't got to,
I don't have a strong opinion on it at this point. I'm just trying to get, so everybody knows, basically. So it's not, so it's
Sure.
clear kind of where we're going here and when these decisions are, or when our recommendations will likely shake out.
Right, and actually, it's a good point, because the other thing is that means that we really only have one meeting between now and town meeting currently scheduled. So, and again, if it's starting to shake out that way, and if the finance committee wants to get together in an off week, we can do that as well. And again, we'll just raise it and see. We'll take the temperature 2 weeks and see where we are. Unless anybody has a feeling about that tonight, sure.
My other question was relative to the 1/12th scenario. So in the scenario that we don't have town meeting on the 13th of June, and we go into the 1/12th scenario, my understanding, very rudimentary understanding, is that the Board of Selectmen basically operates in a 1/12 scenario on behalf of town meeting on a monthly basis. Question for the town manager is that assumption more or less correct?
So the Board of Selectmen would have to approve the 1/12 budget that's submitted to the Director of Local Accounts. And it's actually, I've already spoken with the Finance Director about preparing such a budget in the event we don't have town meeting.
Okay, and in that scenario, with respect to free cash, do the selectmen would they put forth a budget that would reflect all of the free cash potentially? Is that within their purview, or would it be a proportionate amount of free cash?
So if you're speaking about the free cash would be allocated to the capital plan, my personal recommendation, we would not touch the capital plan at that point. Because that situation, and this is something it's also been reiterated by the Division of Local Services, is that what happens in the event those projects aren't approved at the future town meeting,
Right.
and you've spent the money.
Right.
So we would not make that part of the recommendation.
And that free cash would effectively float until whatever point it gets appropriated.
It can, unless we get our free cash from this year certified before then. So
Okay. Yeah. All right.
It's allowable.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. Thank you.
All right, and then to the point of the 1/12 budget, I mean, basically what you're talking about is submitting a budget month to month that will get you through the month. Is that right? Or so you're looking at what you're spending this year?
Right. We would look at where Karen can contribute more because she has been working on this. But some of the things that we see up front in the year are assessments for Worcester County retirement, where our insurance payments are due at the very beginning of the year. So all those will come into play, and that will be taken into account. So what I think, and Karen can correct me, is we were going to be looking towards last July, what was spent.
That's correct. I mean, we would be looking at historically what happened in FY19 in each one of the months that we request the 1/12 spending authorization. So, I mean, you would be basing it on the budget that was actually voted in 20, and not 21, because you don't have a voted budget for FY21.
So you would be working on historical numbers month to month rather than a 12-month average of the entire budget?
Right. It wouldn't be just a flat 1/12 based on the previous year. It would be based on what actually happens in each one of those 12 months. Because we have, like Heather was saying, we have assessments that we have to pay in July. We have liability and workers' comp insurance that we have to pay in July. And then throughout the 12-month period, we have debt service schedules that we have to meet. So, I mean, it's not just taking 1/12 of the prior year budget and saying, this is what we're going to spend. It's, you have to actually look at what's expended in each one of those months.
Yeah, otherwise you potentially go into that month with a deficit before you even start.
Correct.
Right.
Okay,
So
thank you.
In that
Peter?
scenario, I mean, aside from what we spent in FY 2019, there are, collective bargaining, contract obligations. There's, an additional roughly $250,000 that if we kept the same staff in the school department due to step increases, there's increases there. Would that account for all of that? Would that be laid on top?
Well, I think when you request the 1/12 authorization for each one of those months, you have to look at your historical expenditures, but you also have to account for what's going to happen in FY21. So to answer your question, it would be yes, we would have to account for those contractual obligations as well.
And from a process standpoint, understanding that we're on very uncharted territory here. Heather, have you, and Karen, have you thought about a process that, to what extent is the finance committee, the school committee, other boards, will we review this as part of the process with the Board of Selectmen? Is that too cumbersome? What's your thinking?
Well, I know under the statutes, it's not required that you review. It would go through the Board of Selectmen and it would go to the Division of Local Services for their approval. I don't know, because we've never, in all the years that I've been here, we've never had to do this. And we are waiting actually for more guidance from the Division of Local Services that should be posted on their gateway application. They're telling us by no later than June 1st, which, the window gets smaller and smaller. And before you know it, if we don't have the town meeting in June, we will be having to deal with this 1/12 requirement. So
Okay.
it's questionable,
Okay.
to say the least.
I'm slowly recovering myself.
All right.
Mr. Levesque?
Yeah, I would, just on behalf of the Capital Planning Committee, make a motion to adjourn at 8:01 p.m.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Do a roll call vote. John?
Yes, I'm in favor of the motion.
Jim?
Aye.
And I for myself.
Jim, you don't want to
Thank
stay
you.
all night
Thank
and
you
listen
for
and
making
talk about the
yourself
budget?
Well,
Thank you, guys.
Definitely appreciate
No.
I
I'm
do have
just
to,
joshing. I appreciate your input.
I do have
Alan.
to plan on some geometry
Okay.
teaching. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Thank you.
Have a good evening, guys.
You had to go tend to his pupils.
Okay. Okay, yeah. All right, then if there's no other questions on that, and I think it is a good point to bring up in terms of as a process question, because, all right, so our next meeting will be the 28th of May, and then we'll know at that point whether we're going, probably not until the following week, whether or not you're going to a 1/12 budget, because at that point we'll know whether or not they're going to open us up for town meeting, or we have to wait until after we don't have a town meeting to know. Or is it, I don't know.
Yeah,
I can say that the State Board of, I can say that the guidance for town meetings has been circulated through my channels anyway. It's pretty extensive. It's a long list of things that would need to be done, and there's multiple options: indoor town meeting, outdoor town meeting, virtual town meeting. It's incredible reading. It really is.
Right.
Dave,
So Heather, what are you thinking?
Dave, were you talking about the Berkshire Boards of Health document?
No, I thought we got something today that was from the state. Let me, while you guys are talking, I'll take a look back into what I thought was from the state.
Because right now, virtual town meetings are not allowable for an open form of government. They are for a representative form of government. But
All right, so if we had a representative town meeting, then they'd be
Right.
able to do it.
yes,
Okay.
I'd say, we're reacting with the guidance of the governor's, advisories, and we'll put all necessary precautions in place, and unless the governor says we can't. So,
This is going to be discussed at next
So we'll
week's
be
town
doing town
meeting.
meeting
Next week's
start.
Board of Selectmen meeting. Is that
yes,
the intent? Okay.
yes.
Okay.
I can't put my
Does
hands on it right
anyone-
now what I read earlier today, but I will pass it on to everybody if I can find it, if it was anything different than what Heather just brought up.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Did anyone, aside from what was already brought up did anybody have anything in the budget review that they wanted to discuss at this time or bring up for a potential future topic? Again, as we get closer to town meeting or not, so that we can delve a little bit deeper if we do have to look at, again, changing any recommendations that we might be making over time. Which actually, and I'm so sorry, I have been very remiss. Michelle, thank you very much for the letter. I thought the letter was very well done. Speaking of recommending the town budget.
My pleasure.
And I thank you for pulling all that together. And thank you to everyone for chipping in with that. That was awesome. So anyway, does anybody have anything that they want to bring up on the budget itself?
Terry, are we going to go
Okay.
on to the warrant after that? I think that's the way it is on the
It's on the
agenda. isn't it?
agenda.
I'm
It
pretty
is
sure
on
they
the
were both
agenda.
on the agenda. Okay.
Yeah, it was budget then.
It-
Warren.
I'm looking at the agenda. I'm getting there. Warrant article. If we talk about streetlights, I'm going to kill you.
Start shooting.
Oh, man.
Start shooting. For anybody that hasn't watched the Board of Selectmen's meeting from Tuesday night, my feel is they grudgingly deferred to town meeting on it. There are a couple of members on the board that are of the opinion that there's too many what ifs and don't want it to go forward. As I said earlier in the meeting, in my opening comments, that this was the one article that I keyed into that I think is absolutely, if there's any way we can push any of these proposals forward, this is the one that we should be collectively bringing to town meeting that we wholeheartedly support if we have the money when we get to town meeting floor. We've identified a funding source that's in the present year budget, does not affect 2021. This article, if we move forward with a purchase, has a return on investment of a little over 3 years, puts us in a position down the road, if the funding's available through community green communities, to do the conversion. And I don't remember what the time frame was, but in their presentation, there was a $2 million savings number. And Heather, do you remember, was that 10 years, or do you remember what the time period was for that potential $2 million savings if we did everything? Heather, you muted.
25. Oh, 15. I'm sorry, 15. But that was 1.2 million.
Okay. Lot of
One
numbers
point-
bouncing around in
1.2 million
everybody's head.
over- Yeah, over year 15.
Right,
The
but-
question that I had about this, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit before. All right, if we were to go through the process of if we were to go to Unitil and say convert to LED, do we have to pay for that conversion?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, do we then own those fixtures?
No,
But we have to pay for the conversion.
because yes.
Have to pay
And
for
it
the
would save
equipment
an
and the labor, I
electricity
believe.
cost. It
I'm
would
sorry,
save,
Dave, we have to,
Sorry, I spoke over
I
Heather.
hate
Go
to-
ahead, Heather.
it would save in the electricity costs. So we pay upfront for them to convert that's the scenario, to convert those to LED. And then each year thereafter, we save in the electricity costs. Where the other scenario, we pay them to purchase the lights, and we save in electricity and maintenance in the electricity costs once it's converted to LED.
all
The
right,
other
so
thing-
once it's once it was converted to LED, and actually, I just want to go all the way through with what my thinking was on this before I completely lose it. But if the lights were converted to LED, and then we, a year down the road, wanted to then buy the fixtures, do we have to pay for the conversion and the fixtures so it increases the cost of the purchase?
No, we would just have to pay for the fixtures.
So the lights themselves is what we're looking for green communities to try to go after and get a grant to replace. So that we wouldn't pay. So we're saving basically $46,000, but that would be okay. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
No, you guys kind of sorted it out there. Just an off-the-wall comment. If we got into ownership of the infrastructure for the streetlights, and Heather, you might not have an answer for this, or you might laugh at it, but and that would be appropriate. But if we decided 3 or 5 years from now, after owning them, that we didn't want them anymore, we put them up for sale. I can't imagine that there isn't an entity out there that could purchase the infrastructure from us and do the same thing that we would have done and make money at it. But again, that's an off-the-wall comment, but it's just another scenario that's possible within this project.
Happens with highways and prisons all the time, right?
Right.
Okay.
Bottom
So-
line, I'm absolutely confident in this project. I'm not actually on Green Communities, but I've been advocating for this for at least 3 years, and I've stayed very close to the process, and that's why I can speak to the process. I get the numbers mixed up every once in a while, but I'm very confident that this is a very well worth project, and the only one presently proposed in the 2021 budget that has the potential of saving us money year over year with a relatively small investment. And I'll shut up about it now so we can go home one of these hours tonight.
All right, and then basically, it's looking like over the 15-year period of time, they're saying that if we left it with Unitil ownership, the savings over the 15 years would be $400,000. So, depending on what really comes to the floor as a motion, which is going to be the other piece of it, is that the article is written such that either one of those proposals could be what comes to the floor. That's good. To me, that's just a really weird article that it's worded such that we don't even know what it is that's coming to the floor after the discussion in terms of what the motion is that we're going to be making a recommendation on.
So I thought though that Dave Blatt said that they were going with the buy option. So we knew that. We didn't have a funding source, but is the expectation that all that's going to get worked out in advance of town meeting so that we're going to know what the actual worded motion is going to be prior to? Do any of us know how that's going to shake out?
Do you know the answer to that? Because I know that you sent us the articles today, but I honestly didn't read them.
Nor have I.
But
I
I
expect
thought
we'd
that
know before then.
Okay, so when the motion itself hasn't been written, the motion is going to be written to be read by the Board of Selectmen at this point?
Correct.
Is that true? Who's writing the motion?
I
Board
write
of
the
Selectmen will
motions.
write them. Okay.
then are reviewed by town
Oh, you write
council
the motion and the Board of Selectmen. Okay. Okay.
Heather, will
But the motion
Green
itself
Communities
is
have a
made
chance
by
to see
the
that
Board of
motion
Selectmen.
before it goes to town meeting?
No, we'll be in contact with them.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Because my printer cut off the last sentence of the article, but the wording allows for both possibilities. And about halfway through the article, it says, the first is converting the town's existing streetlights to energy efficient and long-lasting LED fixtures, which, from my understanding, would be to let Unitil use it, do that project, and retain ownership. And then it says, or alternatively, acquire said streetlights for potential future conversion to energy efficient and long-lasting LED fixtures. And I sure hope that that second sentence I read is the motion. Honestly.
Well, I guess we'll see.
Yep.
And I think,
Yeah,
I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the discussion is at town meeting. Peter?
yeah, I just, I don't want
I
to
see your
belabor.
hand.
I don't want to belabor the point. I spoke at the selectmen's meeting on Tuesday night. I think, we've gotten a lot of half-baked projects at town meeting, and people have been called out for bringing half-baked projects to town meeting over the course of the last several years. CPA is off. They took it off on Tuesday. I believe we've taken off the primary school deal. This is a project that people, and Dave Blatt in particular, but people have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this thing and have got it to its proposal ready. And there's an ROI on it. And there are certainly some questions about, what's the time and attention required in the town managers and the finance department to manage this thing. My view, and Heather and Karen could certainly comment, is that should be nominal. There's probably some upfront work required to make it happen. But once we get this thing going, it's going to save us a lot of money over a period of, not that long a period of time. And the question is, do we have the money? Right? Which is just like everything else we talked about on the capital budget. This is capital, and it would, conceivably be funded from a very similar source, which is free cash, a different pot of free cash, but free cash nonetheless. So, I think that we need to give this of all the discussions that we're, essentially punting on at town meeting, this one is a discussion that I think it's worth taking the time to have and seriously considering.
Anyone else
If
want
I
to weigh
may,
in
I'd like to have it on the
on
agenda
this
for
one
the
or
next.
any other warrant article?
Yeah. Terry, I'd just like to have it on the agenda for the next meeting so that we could potentially formulate some type of a
Yeah, I heard
formal.
you.
Okay. A formal agreement between our group as to, as Peter
Among
just
our
said,
group?
go on to town
Okay.
meeting for strongly supporting it, even though it won't be printed in the warrant.
Just for clarification, Terry, you had mentioned that you thought we had one meeting, but I'm looking at the 28th and I'm also looking at the 11th. Is that correct?
Oh,
In terms of our
okay.
regular cadence?
All right, then, yes, we'll meet on the 11th.
So, I
All
mean,
right, we'll meet on June 11th. I'm sorry.
assuming we have a town meeting on the
I was
13th, the
forgetting
11th could be,
Monday.
the 11th could be a very productive meeting, and that will probably have a lot, substantially the information that we'll have on the 13th, we'll have on the 11th, and decisions will be perhaps a little bit more
Okay.
easier to come to.
Okay. Hopefully. Well, again, by then we'll know whether there's a town meeting. So, which will be another thing that would be nice to know. But if they're not, if the governor's not opening,
Terry,
I guess we'll get a sense of it on Monday when the governor opens or doesn't open stuff. Dave, are you having a problem with your internet?
Yeah, he's been.
It's
No.
kind of unstable, so I just figured I'd raise my hand rather than
Dave?
interrupt you. Yep, I'm here. It's showing that my audio is
Okay.
going through. Are you guys getting it?
Yeah, I can hear you, Dave. Your
What?
video is herky jerky, but your voice
Yeah.
is good.
Yeah, okay. Actually, I might shut the camera off if it gets too bad. Let me know on the audio because the camera shut off would help that. I was just going to say, I'm assuming because the video is not on, School Committee 3 is the superintendent. Could we invite, if that is the
I would not
superintendent, could we
assume
invite her if she's willing? Okay.
Okay, that would not
She
be
was
the
on
superintendent.
earlier on video, so.
Right. Yeah, no, she was on as.
I was just hoping.
herself.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Disregard my question then.
You must have a. Okay, yeah, I think
That's
there's a
probably
wicked delay going
Carol
on
now
up
that I
there.
think of it. Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other warrant articles that anybody wanted to revisit it either the next meeting that we have? We're good. Karen, thank you for the response on the water district. That was helpful. All right. Then we'll move on to the formation of the debt group. I think what I'd like to do is get a sense of what you folks would like to do around this. My preference would be to have a subcommittee just meet, discuss, and I guess propose. Yeah, I'm not really sure how best to go about this, whether we want to start from an overview of the debt situation or a discussion around how to address it. But I'm almost thinking that we would probably get more done with a small work group. And I don't know how people feel about that.
So,
Peter, I see your hand.
yeah, I think what we probably should discuss, but before we discuss formation of a working group, is what we would hope to achieve.
Yeah.
And my thinking on this, the piece of the pie, the piece of the story that's missing for me, and I think the town manager and the finance director did an outstanding job, not only with budget preparation this year, but really, and I've said this before in this meeting and in others, what we did with the symposium and then getting into the 5-year forecast, although the last few months have certainly thrown that plan off balance a little bit, making people aware of kind of the conditions that we're living in. And the reason why I think that this is particularly important with respect to debt are the big projects that are looming. In particular, TC Pasio's, the Turkey Hill building, and any reconfiguration or disposal of any space that would be vacated as a result of the renovation of TC Pasio's. And if you run all that stuff through and you start totaling up those potential dollar amounts, I see people complaining on social media all the time about, what they complain about their tax bills, but effectively what they're complaining about was the bump that has occurred over the course of the last few years as a result of the middle high school. And this is going to have that kind of effect again if all this comes to bear in a period of 3 or 4 years. So what the 5-year forecast did not include, not through the town manager's fault, it's just that's what is called for under statute for a 5-year forecast, are those scenarios, right? Those spending scenarios tied together with our existing debt circumstances. And I think that, at a very minimum, we need to find a way to paint those pictures for people. down to the total debt that we'd be taking on, the projected percentage that would reflect in the town budget, which could therefore reflect our credit ratings and borrowing costs, but most importantly, what the effect would be on the tax rate. And so that's number one is can we paint that picture given, you know, round numbers associated with these potential projects, just to give people something to chew on. And then the other thing that I think we need to look at is our non-exempt borrowing history over the course of the last 10 years. And think about how that relates to what we could potentially do with capital spending in the future, and potentially explore, you know, Dave's scenario that he's advocated for, which is, you know, potentially funding capital through, you know, an annual debt exclusion. And so, you know, they're different things, all relating to debt, but we talk about them very much in the abstract in our meetings, on kind of an ad hoc basis. And I think that, you know, it might be worthwhile, and perhaps this is a project that leads us into, you know, another symposium next fall, where the finance committee presents to the town and says, here are some scenarios that we've looked at to put the TC Passios, the Turkey Hill, the town hall, the Ritter, the old primary school into some sort of debt context. Now, how we do that, I don't know, but that's the outcome that I'd like to see. I don't know if other people have other thoughts on that. And if I'm the only one, then I might be doing all the work.
Do other
I don't
people
know.
have thoughts on that?
No, Peter,
No,
I
don't,
agree with
I
you
don't think you're the
Michelle?
only one that
that
cares about that topic.
could be the crux of the project.
Dave,
Yeah.
Dave, hold off, Dave. Okay, Michelle, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think that there's interest in that topic, and that
Michelle?
it definitely there's value in exploring it. You know, and that's why I put it in the finance committee letter for the town warrant, because I'm sure that there's interest in the town to start looking at the bigger picture of things as well. So I definitely support taking a look at that.
Okay. Dave, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, hopefully is shutting the video
Okay, so
camera
Dave
off will
turning off his
stabilize
picture
things a
didn't
little
help
bit
his
on this
audio.
end.
Oh.
No, okay.
No, go ahead, Dave. I can hear you.
I'll make some.
I think
Yeah,
both
that's
you and
interesting.
Terry are
Some
having
things-
challenges, but yeah, I've got you loud and clear.
Yeah. For those that can hear me, I was saying that I agree with Peter's thoughts on what might be accomplished with our group, and it's been in the back of my mind that the entire debt policy needed another thorough review, and that would be included in what Peter just suggested as being what we'd like to accomplish and bring to the entire town sometime in the fall or next spring or whatever it turns out to be the time frame. I think that's a good scenario or thing to go through and analyze it thoroughly like we've done with the budget as a committee, and you know, see what spits out the other end.
Jay?
Jay's shaking his head
And muted.
and muted.
Sorry, Jay, you have any thoughts on that?
Not at the minute.
Okay. John?
I do actually. I think Peter's framing of the question, the issues, is very, very good in a couple ways. It brings it to a real reality and a little bit of projection, and also it's something that people can very much grasp how it would affect their tax dollars, tax bills. In favor of it?
Could I just add one
That-
additional thought? One thing I'd really love it if we could accomplish is if we could figure out how to do this well enough before the TC Pasio's project comes to town meeting / ballot. And my reason for thinking that way is, God willing, I'd like to have a set of numbers or a ballpark figure that everybody kind of agrees to prior to the discussion getting political, and misinformation getting batted around. And, if we just throw out a number that's give or take $2 million, at least we have a place to begin with that can basically be a marker. And if we were to do that, ideally, let's say symposium time in the fall, maybe TC Pasio's comes to town meeting and a debt exclusion vote in the spring, then at least we've had 6 months. People have had their opportunity to challenge our numbers, take umbrage with them, whatever they want to do. But when we get to the point where we're having a serious discussion about borrowing $10+ million, people understand the financial ramifications, and it's somewhat understood and agreed to.
Okay, so I guess then that goes to the question of if this is something that we want to do as a committee, which is fine. It gives us the month of July, August. I mean, basically we're coming into fall town meeting prep. So, and I guess that's one of the reasons why I didn't know whether it made sense to try to break that into a smaller work group that had more flexibility around meeting, because they don't have to be posted meetings, but can't be more than 3 people. Or if you wanted to do it as a committee, and I see Heather has her hand up, so she's going to correct me on that. Go ahead.
No, I wasn't going to correct you. I just, what Peter referenced as far as the financial forecast, the big picture is very important when you're talking about debt, and revenues obviously is a huge component of that and what we can afford right now with all the uncertainty. I'm curious where this would be headed if we don't have a clear understanding of what our future revenues will be.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, but I think that from a taxpayer perspective, if we're talking about, so I totally get it as debt as a percentage of revenue. I get that. But from a taxpayer perspective, looking at excludable debt, it's actually a pretty simple formula. If you assume that we're going to raise and we're going to levy to the limit every year, and we're going to add excludable debt, people can get a handle on that, right? I mean, now if we need to do an override to compensate for loss of state funding, that's a whole other ball of wax, and I totally get that. But we have to make some assumptions. I think that we have enough that we can glom onto, recognizing the fact that the total budget is a bit of a problem for the next 12 to 18 months in terms of identifying what that number looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does anyone have a sense of how you'd like to proceed?
Terry, what's the number for our quorum? It's 3, isn't it?
It's
Four.
actually 4.
4, okay, sorry, I don't know why.
Yeah, that's why I said we could have a group, if there was a group of
3
three.
or less.
Yeah. And it could be more than one group. I mean, basically, we could have, like a different focus, but I think that, again, looking at debt from a big picture, it helps to have the same people looking at the big picture. Or we could just go ahead and incorporate it on the budget with a subgroup meeting on the off week, doing some additional work to fill in what we're doing as a committee.
So in
Or
terms
we
of
can just meet more frequently.
in terms of the work required, I mean, to a certain extent, I'm cognizant of the fact that whoever from the finance committee participates in this, whether it's a subcommittee or the committee as a whole, there's a certain amount of legwork required to kind of, go to the school department and talk about what they're thinking in terms of Turkey Hill. We need to, Dave is on the TC Passios committee. I think we can, certainly talk about some round numbers with him and with that committee. I couldn't even begin to guess. I don't know where we would go to look for numbers in terms of reclamation of Town Hall and Ritter, or what even the scenarios are in those circumstances. But we could look at, the studies that have been done and what would it take to bring those buildings up to par. Again, just for round numbers for planning and discussion purposes. Unfortunately, the flip side, the actual bonding and debt service and taxation and all that, we're going to rely heavily on Karen and Heather. And I want to be, conscious of their time as well. But I do think that this is something that, is necessary to do. I don't have a strong opinion as to whether we do it as a full committee or as a subcommittee.
Anybody else? All right. So why don't we do this then? If we start with on May 28th, depending on how long we talk about streetlights.
All night.
Oh, God. I hope not. But anyway, I think if we pull out the debt presentation, and actually, Karen, when you sent that information, did you send it PDF or did you send the information on a spreadsheet?
I'm not sure what information you're talking about.
Terry, I only
right, well,
remember getting the handout. I'm sorry. I only remember getting the handout. I don't remember getting an email.
Okay.
Like the spiral bound handout. And I still have it. I mean, if you want me to run and make copies and send emails with that, I can.
Well, if it was spiral, then I think it's a different one than what I'm thinking. I know that Karen has a spreadsheet that has all of the town's debt going out 26,000 years. And
oh, sorry, I've seen something else.
That was in the 5-year forecast presentation.
I can send that to you. That was just updated. That's right up to date based upon the very latest bond that was issued for the middle school, high school, and the pavement management project. So, I mean, we can certainly send you that spreadsheet, and it is in Excel format.
All right, and then basically if we start and just take a look at that and how we might use that to inform our discussions, and also do a review at that particular point of what are the things that we know are going to be coming up for discussion. As Peter said, looking at all the Vertex studies and all of the what's going on with the elementary school, whether or not it's going to be a tear down or a renovation, and things like that. So I think if we at least start there and then identify whether there's people that want to go out and do pieces of this in terms of getting a sense, then maybe we can just start to develop a plan from there. I mean, I'm just being very slow shifting gears because it's late and but I think that that might be a place to start. That would be my suggestion, and then we just go ahead and go at it as a committee, but have people take pieces of it and come back the following 2 weeks and basically try to set an agenda on the 28th in terms of how we would like to see this go if we wanted to shoot for some kind of a symposium in the fall, knowing that we might not have a symposium in the fall because everything falls apart. Peter?
Nope, I'm
I saw
down
your
with
hand
that
go.
plan. Nope, I'm good.
Okay. And then, yeah, I think that might be just my sense of a way to go. And then, like we'll know who's working and who's not, who's working from home and who's, not working from home and who can do what and, like where we have to go to get information. So, everything will probably be Zoom. So, because I'm not sure if anybody's office is going to be open. All right. So, any more on the debt discussion? So, 28th, we'll go there, and then we'll move on to. Does anybody have any committee reports? Nobody has any committee reports. Does anybody have any public comment?
I have just one question for the town manager, if you don't mind, Terry.
Go ahead.
Are we again just trying to anticipate how things might shake out over the course of the next couple of months and running scenarios through my head in terms of where the governor may allow and not allow certain activities to occur over the course of the next several months, and also being conscious of different people's vulnerabilities when it comes to the COVID-19 virus. In a scenario where we're able to meet in person again at town hall, will we have the capacity to run a hybrid meeting, as we were talking about before all this kind of went down, where members who choose to work remotely can, but members who are able to be present in a live meeting, will we be able to do that?
Do you mean technically will we be able to do it, or per the state law?
I'm familiar with state law. I'm asking technically because
Okay.
I suspect that that law is going to change again, or the guidance around municipal meetings will probably change again. But my question is really a technical question.
Okay. That I would have to confer with public access and IT on how we would do a hybrid model.
I would
All right, and
strongly suggest on behalf of all town committees that we figure that out.
Right.
I do actually just have a follow-up question to that would be whether or not there's potentially going to be a change so that we could do that without having to have a quorum present. Or would we be able to continue to have Zoom meetings going forward if there are people who feel uncomfortable attending a meeting in person? Do you know, there's probably nothing on that yet. Exactly.
No, we're still waiting for guidance from the state. So, and I can tell you it's definitely going to be a slow phased process. So,
Okay.
So you're anticipating we're going to be on Zoom for a while still?
unfortunately, I foresee that for a while.
I'm okay with Zoom. That's all right.
It has its pros and cons, right?
It does. John, you had your hand up?
I did, just, and I hate to interject, or I'm reluctant to interject such a personal comment, but as a male in his 70s, I'm extremely reluctant to stop sheltering in place. And so there's a real example of somebody who would be, say, well, it'd probably come, but it'd be very uncomfortable at a meeting.
Right, right. Yeah, and I have no problem with, and hopefully the direction will be that we would be able to continue with Zoom. That would be great. And then, because I think that there will be people who would be uncomfortable being in that setting.
May I also interject that I'm very grateful to Peter to bring it up, because I was reluctant to start whining in front of all of you.
No, it's helpful to hear. Thank you.
No, I mean, I think not only is every member's participation crucial, particularly now, but we also need to think about public participation as well, you know, and you know, we've got a lot of rather vocal members of the public who fall into the same category as John, and we need to be able to account for their participation as well. And you know, I'm looking forward to the day, frankly, that we can all meet comfortably at town hall. But you know, we may find ourselves in another different scenario in a couple of months, and I just think we need to be technically prepared for other scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Passios.
Yep, I just wanted to agree. Heather had asked me what I thought I had seen in regards to voting in town meetings. It was the Berkshire County Boards of Health Association's document, but I would expect, and I'll know better after our next Board of Health meeting, which is in the first week of June, but I would expect that Neshoba Associated Boards of Health is going to come out with a very similar document. This thing is 7 pages long, just talking about the safety scenarios for voting and or town meeting. I've read through it twice. Seems to be a very thorough document and throws out a number of different options. And to jump through the hoops that are listed in here is going to be unfathomable.
Okay.
I just want to
Heather, is
add,
your hand up?
it is, I just
Okay.
lowered it and raised it because it never lowered before. But just to add to that document that Dave is referencing, that is one of the documents we'll be discussing on Tuesday, which has already been preliminarily reviewed by our town council. And that document is mask order, if you'd say. So it's already, and as we all know, this situation has been very fluid. New information comes out every week. So there are already some things in there that are outdated, as well as there's some items that may be unconstitutionally prohibitive. So we're looking at all those options as part of guidance too.
Okay.
And Jim Garaffi, I understand, will be at that meeting also.
Yes, you will.
Okay. Just as a going back to what Peter said, Eric from TAC put in chat that in the control room they can add in Zoom to the regular cameras that you have in town hall. I guess my question would be to TAC to follow that up then would the chair at the time of the meeting have to have a computer available to bring the Zoom participant in to the meeting? And I guess we can get probably more information on that as we go along, but the fact that it is possible to bring Zoom into in terms of the cable piece of it, that would be good. But in terms of so that means that the person would be showing up on the screen in the conference room.
And that's what we were working
which
on.
actually, if we were I'm sorry?
And that's what we were working on right before the outbreak.
Right.
Okay.
The difference is that we're kind of looking at it from a different scale. You know, 1 or 2 members versus the majority of members potentially, and public. You know, and who knows?
Yeah. Right. So then at that time, you're going to want a different chair who can actually manage more than one thing at a time. That would be all right. So with that, Was there any other public comment? There was nothing in my email, so there was no public comment from the public. So again, the next meeting will be May 28th, and so far on the agenda, I have streetlights and debt. And was there anything else anybody wanted to bring up at that time?
I think we should probably just have a generic items on the agenda for budget and warrant, just because
Okay. Will do.
we can pass over them.
Yep, and we will, then with that, we are at the end of the meeting, so I would be.
Terry,
happy
John
to-
has
Terry John's got his hand up.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
John, I'm
just-
sorry.
Because of the uncertainty with respect to the flow of revenue and cash flow, I'd like to make sure that next meeting we have another update on what the town finances look like, just a general overview, because it is very difficult to project based on the unsettled times.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, then I'll go back to, I will accept a motion, if anyone has one.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Need a roll
Oh,
call.
I'm sorry, roll call, thank you. John,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Jay,
Aye.
and I for myself. Thank you, everybody, have a wonderful
Have a
night.
good night.
And
Good
enjoy your,
night.
Night.
enjoy your week off.
Very
Have a good night.
Aye.
Good night.
Take care.